I was standing in the middle of the Worthington Grill, white tablecloths, candlelight, the kind of place where the bread basket costs more than my grocery run, when my brother leaned across the table and said, loud enough for the whole section to hear, "This is Dex. He flew 2 tours in Afghanistan. A real hero. Not like some people who just push papers for a living." He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't have to. Let me back up. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. My brother is 31, 2 years younger than me. My sister is 26. Growing up, I was the quiet one. The one who got good grades, kept her head down, did what she was told. My brother was the golden child from the moment he could throw a football. My parents went to every single one of his games, sometimes driving 4 hours each way. When I graduated valedictorian of my high school class, my mother said, "That's nice, honey," and then asked if I'd remember to order my brother's jerseys from the printer. I stopped expecting applause a long time ago. After high school, I went to college on a merit scholarship, studied criminal justice, and then got into law school at Georgetown. That part of my life was quiet and mine. I clerked for a federal judge the summer after my second year. I worked 80-hour weeks. I ate a lot of sad desk lunches. I built something. My family knew I was a lawyer. That's about as deep as their understanding went. "So you, help people with divorces?" my mother asked once, at Christmas. "No, Mom. I work for the Department of Justice." "Oh," she refilled her wine. "Do you get good benefits?" I stopped trying to explain after a while. It wasn't worth the energy. My brother, meanwhile, had gotten into real estate in Charleston, South Carolina. He did fine. Not spectacularly, but fine. He drove a nice truck, had a nice apartment, and had recently started dating a woman named, well, I'm going to call her what she called herself, the future Mrs. Dexter Calloway. Her name was Fiona. She had long blonde hair, a lifestyle Instagram with 40,000 followers, and an opinion about everything. Fiona had decided within the first 45 minutes of meeting me at Thanksgiving 2 years ago that I was someone to be pitied. I was someone to be pitied. I was single. I didn't own a home yet. I was renting in DC, which anyone who has lived there understands is not a moral failing but simply a financial reality. I didn't post on social media. I worked too much. I had no balance, she told me, in the same voice you'd use to tell someone they had spinach in their teeth. "You have to make time for yourself," she said, cutting her turkey. "Otherwise, what's the point?" I smiled and passed the gravy. By last spring, Dex and Fiona were engaged. My mother called me crying, happy tears, and said it was the most exciting thing to happen to this family in years. I was in the middle of a pre-trial brief, but I put it down and said congratulations and meant it. I did. I wanted my brother to be happy. What I did not anticipate was what came next. Within a week of the engagement, my mother called again. The rehearsal dinner venue Fiona wanted was $12,000. Did I want to contribute? My brother had just had a slow quarter. They didn't want to start their marriage in debt. I want to be honest here, because if I'm not, I'm no different from the people I'm going to tell you about. I said yes. I transferred $4,000 and told myself it was a gift that came from a place of love. 2 months later, the bridal shower. Fiona's maid of honor had set up a shared expense account for decorations, catering, and a weekend trip to Savannah for a combined bachelorette. Total ask from me, $2,200. I was listed as a bridesmaid. I had met Fiona 4 times. I paid it. Then the dress alterations. Then Fiona's mother needed help with her flight from Portland because she was in a tough spot. Then my own mother told me quietly that she and my dad were short on the wedding gift they planned, a piece of furniture for Dex and Fiona's new place, and could I float them until Dad's retirement? Disbursement came due in the fall? I want to tell you I said no. I want to tell you I had some great moment of clarity. I didn't. I transferred the money and went back to work. The wedding was set for late October. Before that, Dex planned an engagement dinner, a formal celebration, family and a few close friends, at the Worthington Grill. It was his idea to make it a thing. Fiona loved the restaurant. It had a prix-fixe for the private dining room, $180 a head. 14 people. My brother asked if I'd handle the reservation and sort out the bill situation. The bill situation. I booked the private room. I gave my credit card to hold it. I told myself I'd sort out the reimbursement conversation later. The night of the dinner, I drove from DC to Charleston, 4.5 hours, straight from work. I was wearing dress slacks and a blazer because I hadn't had time to go home and change. I'd had a full hearing that afternoon, and I was tired in the way that sits behind your eyes and doesn't move. I got to the restaurant 15 minutes late. Everyone was already at the table. Dex stood up and waved me over like I was a cab he'd hailed. Fiona didn't look up from her phone. "There she is," my dad said, "the workaholic." People laughed. I sat down. I was placed at the far end of the table, next to Fiona's aunt, who spent the first 30 minutes telling me about her gluten sensitivity in clinical detail. Across from me was an empty chair that eventually filled with Dexter's college roommate, a guy named Brennan, who shook my hand and immediately turned away to talk to the person beside him. I ordered water. I looked at the menu. I reminded myself I loved my brother. Dex's toast was warm and funny and exactly the kind of toast you'd expect from him. He talked about Fiona like she'd hung the moon. She cried a little. Her mother cried a lot. My mother reached across the table and squeezed Fiona's hand, which was a gesture I had genuinely never received from her in my adult life, but that's a separate conversation. Then Dex said he wanted to introduce Fiona's fiancé, which got a laugh since he was the fiancé, and then corrected himself and said he wanted to introduce someone special. He put his hand on the shoulder of the man sitting to his right. "This is Dex," he said. I blinked. His name was also Dex, short for Dexter, same as my brother. It was a coincidence that had apparently been a running joke all through their friendship. The man's actual name was Dexter Calloway Jr., which was my brother's full name too, and the group had taken to calling my brother Big Dex and his friend Little Dex, or just Dex. What I'm telling you is that the man my brother was about to introduce was named Dex Harmon, and he was a veteran. 2 tours. He was square-jawed and self-possessed in the way of people who have been in genuinely dangerous situations and come out the other side not needing to prove anything. He nodded at the table when my brother introduced him, nothing more. "A real American hero," my brother said, and he meant it. There was no performance in his voice, which made what came next worse. He looked down the table, at me. Not like some people who just push papers for a living. It landed in the room like a stone in still water. I saw Fiona press her lips together to hide a smile. I saw my mother look at her water glass. My dad chuckled. Dex Harmon didn't smile. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Curious, maybe. I didn't say anything. I reached for my water. "She's a lawyer," Brennan said, helpfully, from across the table. "That's not exactly paper pushing." "She works for the government," my brother said in the same tone people used to say she's in between jobs. "It's very bureaucratic." Fiona laughed. It was a small laugh, just a breath, but it was there. "Well," my mother said, "she's always been more of a behind-the-scenes person." I put my glass down. "Mom," I said, "I'm literally sitting right here." "I just meant, you know what I mean, honey." I did know what she meant. I had always known what she meant. The dinner moved on. The food was good. I'll give the Worthington that. The conversation swirled around wedding plans, honeymoon ideas, a piece of property Dex was excited about in Mount Pleasant. Nobody asked me anything beyond, "How's DC?" And when I started to answer, my brother's phone buzzed and he looked at it and the moment passed. We were somewhere in the third course when Fiona brought me back into the room. She was talking about the wedding venue, a restored plantation house outside Charleston, which had its own complicated history that I'd silently noted and not commented on, and she mentioned that the coordinator had raised the catering minimum by $3,000 since they'd signed the contract. "It's such a headache," she said to the table generally. My mother looked at me. I am not exaggerating when I tell you that she looked directly at me. "I'm sure it'll work out," I said. "It's just such bad timing," Fiona continued. "We've already stretched the budget so much." I felt the silence the way you feel weather. Pressure before the storm. "Anyway," Fiona said, and she smiled at me across the table. "Family takes care of family, right?" There were 12 other adults at that table. No one looked at anyone except me. And this is the part I am not proud of. This is the part where, if you're watching this and you want to yell at your screen, I understand. I opened my mouth to say something vague and accommodating. But then Dex Harmon spoke. He had been quiet most of the evening. He'd listened more than talked, which I'd noticed. He had the bearing of someone who measured his words. "I'm sorry," he said, not unkindly, but with a steadiness that cut through the ambient noise of the room. I just want to make sure I understand. He looked at Fiona, then at my brother. Are you asking her, he nodded toward me, to cover the venue's new catering cost? Fiona smiled and falter exactly, it just froze. It's a family thing, my brother said. She's already covering the rehearsal dinner, Dex Harmon said. I heard you mention it earlier. The table got very quiet. And the bridesmaid weekend, he said. He wasn't being aggressive, his voice was almost conversational, but he didn't look away. Your roommate mentioned it when we were outside. My brother shifted in his seat. Dex, man, this is... What do you do? Dex Harmon asked me directly. It was the first time all night anyone had asked me that question and waited for the answer. I looked at him for a moment. There was something in his face, not pity, not performance, just attention, actual attention. I'm a federal prosecutor, I said. I work in the public integrity section at DOJ. The table was still quiet. Public integrity, Dex Harmon repeated. He nodded slowly. That's the unit that prosecutes public corruption, elected officials, law enforcement, that kind of thing. Yes, I said. That's not a paper-pushing job, he said. He looked at my brother when he said it. My brother laughed a little uncomfortably. Come on, man, it was a joke. I know, Dex Harmon said. I'm just clarifying. My mother said something about dessert. The conversation fragmented and reassembled around safer territory. But something had shifted. I could feel it in the room the way you feel a change in altitude. A subtle pressure adjustment that your body registers before your brain does. After dinner, after the prefixie had been charged to my card, $2,520 including gratuity, people gathered their coats and said their goodbyes in the restaurant's small foyer. Dex Harmon found me near the door. I apologize, he said, if that was out of line. It wasn't, I said. He paused. I've been on the other side of that table, different context, but the same dynamic, where someone keeps paying and everyone keeps letting them. He looked at his shoes briefly, then back at me. It's not generosity thereafter, it's a pattern. I didn't say anything for a moment. 2 tours, I said. Marine Raider. Second tour was with an interagency task force. I can't say much about it, but we worked alongside some DOJ people actually. Embedded legal advisors for the targeting process. I nodded. I knew what that meant. That's serious work, I said. So is yours, he said. My brother appeared at my elbow, car keys in hand. Great night, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. Thanks for handling the bill. He said it the way you'd thank someone for grabbing the check at Applebee's. We'll figure out the venue thing next week, okay? I know you'll do the right thing next week, okay? I know you'll do the right thing. He walked out before I could respond. I stood there in the foyer of the Worthington Grill, holding my coat, and something that had been quietly breaking for a very long time finally made a clean, decisive sound. I did not transfer money for the venue overage. I did not respond to my mother's text the following Tuesday asking if I had had a chance to think about helping out. I did not answer my brother's call on Thursday. I sent a text instead, I love you and I'll always love you. But I've been funding things that aren't mine to fund for a long time, and that's going to stop now. Not as punishment. Just as honesty. He didn't respond for 8 days. When he did, the text said, I didn't realize you felt that way. I sat with that for a while. What it meant that he hadn't realized. What it said about how invisible a person can be, even in the middle of a family, even at a table where everyone is looking directly at them. Fiona's wedding went forward in October. I was not invited to participate in the ceremony. My name was removed from the bridesmaid lineup in August, which my mother delivered to me over the phone with the careful neutrality of someone reading a weather report. I thanked her. I meant that too. I did attend the wedding. I sat in the third row and watched my brother marry someone who had never once asked me a sincere question about my life. I wore a dress I already owned. I cried a little during the vows because my brother was happy and he is still my brother, and those two things coexist in me without contradiction. At the reception, there was a moment. I was standing near the bar with a glass of sparkling water when Dex Harmon appeared beside me. You came, he said. He's my brother, I said. He nodded like that answered something bigger than the question he'd asked. We stood in the comfortable quiet of two people who have already said the most important things to each other and don't need to fill the air. The venue overage, he said eventually. Did you? No, I said. He smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. Good, he said. Across the room, my brother and Fiona were dancing their first dance. They looked genuinely happy. My mother was watching them with her hand over her heart. My dad was filming on his phone. It was a beautiful scene. I was glad to be in the room for it. I was also, for the first time in a long time, not responsible for having built the room. That's a quiet kind of freedom. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a moment of public vindication or a table full of witnesses going silent at the right time. It comes at the end of a long drive home on an October night, the highway empty, the radio low, when you realize your chest doesn't feel tight anymore. I don't know what the right word is for what I became in that year. Wiser, maybe. Or just more honest, with myself, mostly. What I know is that I went to work the following Monday, and I did my job. The job that no one at that table had taken the time to understand, and it mattered. It mattered to people whose names I'll never be able to say in cases the public will never hear about, and that used to feel small, and now it doesn't. If you have someone in your life who keeps asking you to carry what isn't yours to carry, I want you to hear this. The moment you put it down, the weight doesn't vanish, but it stops being yours. And that distinction, it turns out, is everything. I keep coming back to that moment in the foyer. Not the dinner, not the toast, not even what my brother said about paper pushing. The foyer. Standing there with my coat over my arm and the bill already charged to my card and Dex Harmon saying, quietly, "It's not generosity thereafter, it's a pattern." That sentence did something to me that years of my own internal reasoning hadn't managed to do. Not because it was new information, some part of me had always known, but because someone said it out loud, plainly, without asking anything from me in return. And in that moment, I understood something about the difference between knowing a thing and being willing to act on it. For a long time, I told myself that paying was love, that showing up, financially, logistically, emotionally, was how I kept my place in the family. And maybe early on that was even true. But somewhere along the way, it had curdled into something else, into an arrangement. And the arrangement only worked because I kept agreeing to it, silently, by never once saying no. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with, not what they asked of me, what I allowed. There's a version of this story where I'm the victim and everyone else is the villain, and that version is easier to tell. But it's not quite honest. The honest version is that I am a person who prosecutes corruption for a living, who understands leverage and coercion and the slow architecture of manipulation better than most people ever will. And I still let it happen in my own kitchen, at my own family's table, for years. That's not stupidity. It's something closer to a failure of moral clarity about my own life. It's easier to see clearly when you're looking outward. What changed wasn't that my brother said something cruel. He'd said cruel things before. What changed was that I watched a man I'd met 3 hours earlier apply the same clear-eyed assessment to my situation that I apply to federal cases every single day. And he reached the obvious conclusion in about 40 seconds. That was the mirror I needed. I think about the kind of person I want to be, and it always comes back to 3 things. Whether I'm doing what's right even when no one is watching or rewarding me for it. Whether I'm thinking clearly about my own life with the same rigor I apply everywhere else. And whether I have the steadiness to hold a boundary not once, in a dramatic moment, but again and again in the quiet ordinary days that follow. I said no to the venue overage. I said no the following week and the week after that. My mother still calls. My brother and I are still finding our way back to something. It's slow and it's uncomfortable, and there are no clean resolutions, because real life doesn't have them. But I drove home from that October wedding alone on a dark highway, and my chest didn't feel tight. And I thought about Dex Harmon's voice in that foyer. Steady, unhurried, not unkind, and I thought, that's what it sounds like when someone sees you clearly and tells you the truth anyway. I'm still learning how to do that for myself.